I stood in the kitchen, my apron stained with grease, the smell of grilled meat and burnt bread clinging to my skin like a thin veil of smoke. Outside, cheerful music blasted from the Bluetooth speaker, mixing with the lively chatter of my parents and nearly 30 guests raising glasses to celebrate their 35th wedding anniversary. A big party, strung with twinkle lights and fresh flowers, hosted right in the backyard of our wooden house in the suburbs of Charleston, South Carolina. I, Christina, 33, am the eldest daughter, also the one who started setting up the tent before sunrise, carried every table and chair into the yard, hung every string light on the oak tree, and grilled countless batches of burgers for the big happy family, soaking in the festive mood. Lisa, my younger sister, was lounging on a wicker chair by the pool, sipping a cocktail her husband had mixed. Our youngest, Jack, was laughing with the kids, and no one cared that I was still working the grill. Sweat soaked the back of my shirt, but no one asked a single question. By the time the sunset bathed the garden in golden light, my father, Robert, stood up and gently tapped his silver spoon against a glass. Everyone immediately fell silent, turning their attention to him. My mother, Margaret, stood beside him, her arm looped through his, beaming. "We have something special to share," my father said in a deep voice, full of pride. "Next week, the whole family is going on vacation to the Florida Keys. A 7-day trip, all booked. There'll be blue water, white sand, and an outdoor party right on a yacht." Cheers erupted like fireworks. Lisa hugged her husband and jumped with excitement. Jack shouted, "Yes! I told you there'd be a surprise." My mom nodded nonstop, her face glowing. For a moment, I felt a wave of relief. A vacation. Maybe this was finally my chance to rest after so many years of being the one behind the scenes. I washed my hands, walked toward the table, and gave a polite smile. "When are we leaving? I'll need to adjust my work schedule a bit." The air suddenly felt unnaturally still. Eyes glanced at me, then quickly turned away as if my question had never been asked. My father frowned, his gaze turning cold. "You don't need to know," he said slowly, clearly enough for everyone to hear. "You're not part of us." I thought I misheard. My eyes widened and I froze. My mother scoffed and shrugged, like his words weren't worth caring about. She turned to chat with a distant aunt, leaving me standing in the middle of the yard with empty hands. The silence lasted only a few seconds, but it was enough to drown out every sound in my head. Then the murmurs picked back up, washing over me like a wave of indifference. I had cleaned the house, made the shopping list, cooked Mom's favorite stew, and ran around to make sure this party went perfectly. And yet, the daughter who gave up a study abroad opportunity to stay home and care for the family when Dad had a stroke, was being treated like an outsider. I don't remember how I slipped away from the crowd. I only realized I was on the porch when I felt my hand gripping my purse tightly. The heavy summer air didn't bother me nearly as much as the weight in my chest. It felt like someone had slammed shut a door I'd been holding open for decades. "Christina, are you okay?" Lisa's voice came from behind, hesitant. I didn't turn around. I opened the wooden gate and walked out, leaving the twinkling lights behind me. Each step down the gravel path toward the garage felt like it was tearing apart the last piece of me that still held on to their kindness. I got into my car, shut the door, and cranked up the AC, trying to blow away everything that had just happened. I didn't cry. I just felt empty, like everything inside me had been drained. I turned on the radio. An old country song came on, singing about leaving a place once called home. I nodded quietly. Maybe it was time for me to leave too. Not to run away, but to start living. I returned to my small apartment on the 3rd floor of an old building in the south of Savannah, where every step in the hallway echoed with creaky wood and the scent of nearby meals lingered in the air. The place was only about 430 square feet, but I kept it spotless, my own little corner of the world, untouched by anyone else. I took off my heels, sank into the armchair by the window, and stared into the dark sky. Outside was an empty parking lot, yellow lights reflecting off the hoods of worn-out cars. The party was over. My father's words still echoed in my head like a cut that wouldn't heal. "You're not part of us." I had sacrificed my youth to carry their burdens. At 19, I turned down a full-ride scholarship to stay home and care for Mom after her minor stroke. At 24, I took out a loan to buy Dad's truck when his business went under. At 30, I planned Lisa's wedding, while all she had to do was pick out a dress. I was their shadow, silent, unseen, and no one ever thought to say thank you. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the living room floor, pulling out boxes from under the bed, old keepsakes, family photos from when I was a little girl clutching a teddy bear behind Mom's legs, a birthday card I made in 5th grade that no one ever responded to. I had kept everything like proof that I existed in that house. But now, they all felt meaningless. At 3 a.m., I stood up, walked into the bedroom, and pulled an old suitcase from the top of the closet. I didn't need much: a few outfits, my travel camera, a journal, and some essentials. I opened the small drawer by the bed and took out the envelope with the savings I had quietly set aside each month, even though my office job didn't pay much. Nearly $1,200. Not enough for a luxurious new life, but enough to leave this place and breathe on my own terms. I opened Google Maps on my phone, looking at the map of the U.S. with countless little glowing dots, like invitations. I wanted the ocean. I needed the air of freedom, of wide-open spaces where no one gave orders or reminded me to become a version of myself they expected. I remembered a coastal city on the west side of Florida, Clearwater. I had once come across the name in a travel article, a place with soft white sands stretching far and palm trees swaying in the ocean breeze. I had never been there, which only made it more appealing. I booked the earliest bus, 6 a.m. from the Savannah Greyhound station, one way. I turned off the lights, locked the door, and slung my backpack over my shoulder while the sky was still wrapped in a thin layer of fog. The station was quiet, with only a few people scattered around. A woman holding a cat in a fabric bag, a young man wearing headphones staring at his phone. I bought a bland cup of coffee from a vending machine and sat down to wait. The bus arrived, the doors opened, and the driver greeted me with sleepy but friendly eyes. I stepped on, handed over my ticket, and chose a seat by the window. As the wheels began to turn, I looked through the glass and saw my reflection mixed with the dimming streetlights. Savannah faded into the distance, taking with it the years I had once called home. I didn't know what waited for me in Clearwater: a new job, a temporary place to stay, or just days wandering by the sea. But one thing I knew for sure: the place I had just left was no longer home. And this time, I wasn't running. I was choosing. I quietly opened my notebook, turned to a blank page, and wrote the first line in firm handwriting. Day 1, I begin again, from myself. I arrived in Clearwater close to noon, the sun high above and the heat rising from the pavement like a foggy mirror. The bus station was small, just an information desk, a few benches, and a vending machine. I stood still for a moment, gripping the strap of my backpack, looking around the unfamiliar city with my heart pounding. No one knew who I was, and that felt more comforting than I expected. I rented a small room above an old bar called Theo's, less than a 10-minute walk from the beach. The innkeeper, Mr. Theo, a man in his 60s with salt-colored beard and eyes sharp enough to read your thoughts, just waved off my question about ID. Pay a week up front? Around here, everyone's needed a fresh start. My room was a small attic space, just enough for a single bed, a worn wooden desk, and a window facing the parking lot. Downstairs, the bar buzzed every night, but I didn't mind. The music and laughter felt like a different rhythm of life, a sound that reminded me the world was still spinning, and I was now part of a different corner of it. The next morning, I walked barefoot along the beach, my feet sinking lightly into the sand. The salty breeze tangled my hair, but I didn't bother to fix it. I stepped into a small cafe called Misty Beans, sitting on a corner near the harbor with a hand-painted sign and chipped wooden chairs. The girl behind the counter had a chestnut pixie cut and smoky gray eyes. She glanced at me from head to toe, then said without greeting, "We're seriously short on staff. You know how to pull an espresso?" I froze for a second. "I can learn fast." She raised an eyebrow, then tossed me an apron. "I'm Brooke, starting today. Don't spill milk on the steamer. It just got cleaned." I didn't know what made Brooke hire me after just one sentence, but from that moment, I was part of Misty Beans, a little coffee shop full of odd but genuine people. Regulars included fishermen, dock workers, a few musicians who dropped by to play harmonica in the corner, and an older woman who ordered a decaf every morning but never finished it. Brooke was sharp, a bit blunt but not unkind. She worked like a whirlwind, fast, precise, and never polite. But at the end of each shift, she'd quietly leave a whole muffin set aside for me, without saying a word. Maybe that was her way of caring. One afternoon after work, I wandered into a thrift store tucked deep in an alley behind a church. In the darkest corner of the shop, I spotted an old, dusty camera, square-shaped with peeling faux leather at the edges. I picked it up and turned it over in my hands. Canon AE1, a film camera I had once dreamed of back in high school. "Want it?" the shop owner asked, voice low and raspy. "Still works, just needs film." I hesitated, then nodded. Buying it wasn't exactly a wise financial move, but I felt like I had just picked up a piece of memory long forgotten. I used to own a similar camera, but I sold it to help Dad pay the electric bill when I was 20. This time, I bought it for myself. That night, I sat on the back steps behind the bar, the first roll of film already loaded. I snapped a few shots, dim streetlights, tree shadows stretching across the pavement, a couple walking by, hand in hand. The photos wouldn't be perfect, the lighting wasn't right, but pressing that shutter made my heart stir to a rhythm I thought I had forgotten. Brooke passed by, eyeing me curiously. "Thought you only knew how to make coffee." I smiled softly, lifted the camera, and snapped a picture of her in the yellow glow. "Turns out I still remember I once had a dream." She didn't say anything, but gave a slight nod, as if she understood more than I had shared. And for the first time in a long while, I felt something inside me slowly coming back to life. Not for anyone else, but because I had finally started listening to myself. One evening after my shift, I was sitting in my cramped attic room, soft yellow light spilling onto a freshly developed photo hanging on the wall. A shot of the dock at sunset, orange blending into purple between the cables stretching across the sky. I had just finished cleaning up and opened a new box of film when my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with the words "Emily, little sister." My heart sank. I let it ring a few times before answering, holding it to my ear without saying anything first. Emily's voice came through, full of concern. "Where are you? Everyone's freaking out because you just left like that. Mom said you didn't say a word, just disappeared, like you never existed." I leaned my head against the wall and took a deep breath. Emily was only 19, the only one in the family who had ever asked if I was tired, who once sat with me the whole afternoon when I got sick from overworking while still having to take care of the kids. "I'm okay, and I need this. Not to run away, but to find myself again." I spoke softly, without a hint of anger. "But they're saying all kinds of stuff about you. Mom called you ungrateful. Dad got so mad he smashed the TV remote." Emily paused, then sighed. "You know what? They still planned to go to Florida, but now they're making me stay home to watch the kids. I told them I couldn't, and they said, 'Then call Christina. Tell her to come back and make it right.'" I laughed, not because it was funny, but because the story had gotten so old it was almost boring. Make it right? I lived like a shadow in that house for over a decade. What exactly am I making right? I know better than anyone." Emily's voice softened. "But they never see it. They just see you as the one who can handle everything." "And they were wrong," I said firmly. "This time, I'm not coming back to patch up the cracks they made. You need to understand that." Emily was quiet, then whispered, "I miss you." "I miss you too," I replied. "But if I go back, I'll be pulled right back into that role, and I can't live that life again." We sat in silence for a moment. Then she ended the call with a quiet sigh. I stared at the phone for a long time, feeling heavy, but I knew I couldn't falter now. Just 2 days later, while I was wiping tables at Misty Beans, my phone rang again. This time it was Mom. I wasn't going to answer, but then, out of some old reflex I hadn't quite let go of, I swiped the screen. "Christina?" Her voice came through immediately, no greeting. "Do you still care about this family at all? Walking out in the middle of everything? Do you think that was the right thing to do?" I put the rag down and stepped into the back of the shop to get away from the noise. I already said, I need space. I'm not the one who cleans up behind everyone anymore. "Don't raise your voice," Mom snapped. "You've thrown the whole family into chaos. Lisa can't handle all 3 kids. Jack has to work overtime. Who's supposed to watch them? Weren't you always the best at that?" I let out a dry laugh, my voice still calm. Yes, I was good at it. So good that everyone thought it was my duty. But it wasn't. It was a sacrifice. And now I'm choosing not to sacrifice anymore. She paused for a second, then said, cold as ice, "If you walk away this time, don't expect to come back. We don't need selfish people." I swallowed hard, then spoke, my voice steady. "Good. Because I don't need a family that only sees me when they need something. I used to be the pillar that held everyone up, and all I got in return was being forgotten." "Christina," I cut her off. "I spent my whole youth making sure everyone else was okay. I skipped college. I worked 2 jobs. I gave pieces of my life to everyone else. Now, I just want to keep one piece for myself. If that makes me selfish in your eyes, then so be it." I hung up before she could say anything more. My heart was pounding. My hand gripped the phone so tightly my fingertips turned white. Brooke passed by, raising an eyebrow. "You look like you just ran a marathon in the sun. Call home?" I nodded and sighed. "Not easy, but necessary." She smirked and handed me a cold lemonade. "Cut the anchor if you want the boat to float." I gave a faint smile. There was a quiet truth in her joke. I had started to leave the old waters behind, even if the new waves were shaky. At least this time, I was the one steering. That night, after a nearly 10-hour shift, I was just about to head upstairs when Brooke stopped me at the back door of Misty Beans. She had on a denim jacket, a canvas backpack slung over her shoulder, and that familiar half-smile, half-sarcastic look on her face. "Christina," she said, "there's a photography class tonight at the community center near the beach. A friend of mine, Julian, is teaching. You should check it out. Bring that dusty old camera of yours." I blinked in surprise. "I thought you didn't believe I could take a decent photo," she winked. "I still don't. But Julian has an eye. Who knows? Maybe your photos aren't that bad." Instead of going back to my room like usual, I followed her to the community center, a 1-story cream-colored building tucked behind a row of palm trees. The classroom was lit with warm yellow lights, the chairs arranged in a circle, and photographs hung all over the walls. From crashing waves to toothless elderly smiles. Julian was a man in his 40s, with long hair tied back and ink stains always on his hands. He looked at me, then at the camera in my hand, and smiled. "Canon AE1, a classic choice," he said. "You shot before?" "I did, but it's been a long time," I replied, my voice low. "Then it's perfect timing," Julian nodded. "This class isn't about turning anyone into a pro. We just want to help people see the things they've forgotten to notice." That evening's class had no dry theory, no overwhelming techniques, just conversations about light, emotion, and the stories hidden in every image. Julian gave me my first assignment. Photograph something you can't forget. I went out to the beach early the next morning, camera in hand, heart feeling empty. I didn't know what to shoot. But then, in that moment when the light filtered through the beams of the old pier, I raised the camera. That became the first shot in a series of photos capturing pieces of what shaped me. A rusted bike abandoned by a fence. A young mother pushing a stroller while holding a second child in her arms. Sandals neatly lined up outside someone's front door. Each image felt like a whisper from memory. Distant, yet achingly familiar. Julian started paying more attention to me. He would linger longer in front of the photos I brought in. One day, he said, "Christina, your photos have something real. Not perfect, but honest. You should think about putting them into a set." I was a bit unsure. "You mean, like an exhibit?" He nodded. "There's a local photo showcase next month. The theme is me and the pieces I carry." "I think your work fits." I spent a whole week thinking it over. But one night, flipping through my developed negatives, I realized the set had its own rhythm. A story without words. I titled it, "Roots and Wings," because I had once clung so tightly to where I came from, but now I was learning how to fly away. The day of the exhibit took place in a renovated warehouse turned art space. My photos were displayed on a panel of raw wood. The lights above cast shadows onto each frame. I wore a simple pale blue dress, my hair loosely pinned up, standing among strangers, each sipping wine slowly. Julian came over, placed a hand on my shoulder, and whispered, "You've stepped out of your shadow." An older woman stopped in front of the photo I took of the rusty bike. She turned to me and asked, "Did you take this?" I nodded. She smiled, her eyes slightly glassy. It reminded me of my childhood. I had a bike just like that. "Thank you." Just those 3 words, "thank you," made something inside me tremble. For the first time, something I created, not for anyone else, not out of duty, but for myself, had touched someone else. That night, I left the exhibit after the streetlights had come on. Brooke waved at me from a distance, raising a soda can in celebration. Julian shook my hand and told me a small gallery was considering inviting me to join a street photography series. I walked along the beach, the waves gently brushing the shore. Inside, there were no more questions like, do I deserve this, or what would they think if they saw me here? In their place was something simple but whole. I was heading in the right direction. And for the first time in many years, I knew with certainty the place where I belonged wasn't where people needed me to do everything. It was where I got to be myself. One afternoon in early April, I was behind the counter at Misty Beans, quickly whipping up a round of lattes for a group of tourists from New Jersey, when the bell above the door jingled. I looked up, out of habit, and as soon as my eyes hit the doorway, I froze. He stood there. Robert Mitchell, a tall man with neatly combed salt and pepper hair, wearing the same old plaid shirt I had ironed for him hundreds of times. My father. He didn't look around the shop, didn't greet anyone, just stared straight at me, as if nothing else existed in the room filled with the smell of coffee and quiet chatter but him and me. I set the latte down on the tray, wiped my hands on a cloth, and stepped out from behind the counter. My heart pounded, like part of me hadn't quite prepared for this moment. But my feet didn't tremble, not like they used to. "You came a long way," I said calmly. "Clearwater's over 400 miles from Savannah." My father cleared his throat, his gaze stiff. "We need to talk." I signaled to Brooke. She nodded and took over the counter without a word. I led my father to the back of the shop, where a wooden bench sat under a low-hanging palm tree, sunlight flickering through the leaves and scattering patterns across the ground. Dad sat down first, slowly, as if carrying the weight of something heavy. I sat across from him, arms folded. Your mother's very disappointed," he began, his voice not loud but heavy enough to weigh down the air. "The Florida trip was canceled. Lisa couldn't handle the 3 kids. Jack got into a fight with his wife and left for 3 days. Everything's a mess." I looked at him, neither nodding nor shaking my head. Just silent. "We didn't expect you to just walk away like that," he continued, "without saying a word. It's like the family means nothing to you anymore." I gave a thin smile without a trace of sarcasm. And what about that day? When you told me I wasn't part of the family? Was I supposed to stay, keep wiping tables, holding babies, and faking smiles while you all ignored me during the vacation? His face twitched slightly, but he didn't argue. For the first time, I saw uncertainty in him. The man who always believed he had the right to raise his voice, make decisions, and pile every burden onto me without a single thank you. You don't know how much you've sacrificed, he said, a little softer. I nodded. You're right. You don't know. Because when I withdrew my application to study photography in Boston to stay home and care for Mom, you said it was the natural thing to do. When I gave Lisa all my savings for her wedding, Mom said it was what the eldest sister should do. But now, no one's left to carry the load. And no one knows what to do. I leaned back against the bench, looking him straight in the eye. I'm not angry. Not anymore. But I'm also not obligated to come back and patch up a life everyone assumed I'd always be there to save. He stayed quiet for a long time. For a moment, I thought he might blow up, stand up and walk away. But instead, he just exhaled slowly. I didn't realize how much this hurt you. I was surprised by that sentence, not because he apologized, he still hadn't, but because for the first time he admitted he hadn't known. It was the first crack in the wall I thought would never change. What are you doing here? He asked, his voice lower now. Rebuilding my life, working at a cafe, learning photography again. I had my first exhibition last week. Someone bought one of my photos. He tilted his head slightly, a shift in his eyes. I didn't know you were still taking pictures. I smiled faintly. You never asked. We sat a few more minutes in silence. The wind rustled through the palm leaves, carrying the salty air and the faint sound of music from the cafe. Finally, he stood up. He didn't reach out, didn't say anything sentimental. The door at home's still open if you want to come back. I stood too, not nodding, not promising. I just said, I am home, Dad, right here. He gave a small nod, one I couldn't tell was out of acceptance or reluctance. But whatever it was, as his figure disappeared behind the row of buildings, I felt a part of the weight in my chest lift. I hadn't gotten angry, hadn't run, hadn't caved in. I had said everything I needed to say. And most importantly, I no longer felt like I owed them anything. I went back inside the cafe, where the smell of coffee was still warm and customers' laughter still filled the air. Brooke raised an eyebrow when she saw me come in. You okay? I nodded, my smile small but certain. Better than ever. 2 weeks after seeing Dad, I received an email from a local art gallery called Babysit Collective. They had attended the photo showcase at the community center and were especially drawn to the Roots and Wings collection. In the email, they invited me to display several of my photos in the upcoming summer exhibition, a yearly event that draws both locals and visitors from all over to Clearwater. I read the email 3 times, my heart pounding. For the first time in my life, a door I thought I'd missed forever had opened in the most unexpected way. No more, Christina, can you help out? Or, hey, can you watch the kids for a bit? But Christina, the photographer. I brought the news to the cafe, planning to tell Brooke after my shift. But the moment I stepped into the prep kitchen, she turned around with a look that said she already knew everything. You got the invite from Babysit, didn't you? She asked, one hand pouring milk, the other pressing the espresso grinder. I blinked. How'd you know? Julian's terrible at keeping secrets, she smirked. Anyway, I told you, you have the eye of someone who's lived in silence. I didn't answer right away. But later, back in that dim attic room, I sat down and opened the leather notebook I used to jot down a line or two each day. On a fresh page, I wrote, I've stepped out of the shadows and the light doesn't scare me anymore. 3 days later, I got a text from Emily. Just one line. They're planning a trip to Hawaii. This time, Mom hired a babysitter. I looked at the message, feeling something old and dusty dissolve inside me. Not bitterness, not regret, just a clear awareness. They figured it out without me. They didn't need me. And that wasn't as sad as I once thought. I replied simply, "Have a great trip. Take care of yourself." Emily sent back a smiley face, then silence. But that was enough. I knew she understood, and I no longer needed to prove anything. The Baylight Collective exhibit took place on a breezy May afternoon, with cool sea air drifting through the tourist-filled streets. The gallery space was inside a renovated warehouse. White walls, bare wooden floors, and warm yellow lighting like late sunlight. My photos were displayed in the last section, 5 in total, arranged along the length of a journey. The first was a shot of an empty pier at sunset, symbolizing separation. The final one was a photo I took of Brooke standing beneath the palm tree behind the cafe, holding a cup of coffee and smiling. Soft light falling on her hair like an unnamed piece. I stood quietly watching people pass by, their eyes lingering on the photos. No one knew who I was, and I liked that. I was no longer Big Sister Christina, the one who handles everything. I was a storyteller. Through light and time. A middle-aged woman stopped in front of the palm tree and stood there for a while. She turned to me and asked softly, "Did you take this?" I nodded. She gently touched her chest and smiled. "I don't know why, but this photo makes me want to go home." I thanked her, though my throat tightened. It was the first time someone truly felt what I tried to capture. That sense of being lost, then finding yourself again through something simple. An hour later, a gallery representative came to find me, announcing that the old pier, the first photo in the Roots and Wings series, had been purchased by a collector from New Orleans. $200. Not a large sum, but to me, it was a quiet confirmation that I had done the right thing. That night, I left the gallery with an envelope of cash in my hand and unformed dreams in my head. I stopped by Misty Beans. Brooke was cleaning up the last of the cups. "Can I buy you a cappuccino?" I asked, half joking. She glanced at me. "I thought you were a big-shot artist now, coming back to play barista?" I laughed. "No. I came back because this place is part of the journey. And I still love coffee." We sat by the window, streetlights sparkling outside. I told her about the woman at the gallery, the photo buyer, and how I no longer felt the pull to return to the things that once held me down. "You've found your freedom," Brooke said, her voice soft like waves. I didn't answer. I just looked out at the street, where an old bicycle rolled past under the lights, leaving a trail of shimmer like a never-ending current. I knew, from that moment on, I wasn't going back. Because this life, simple as it may be, windswept as it still is mine. Leaving my family wasn't something I ever imagined I'd do, but the moment they pushed me out of their world, another door opened, the one that led to freedom. I am no longer the one who carries the weight, no longer the shadow behind their expectations. Now, I live my own life with my old camera, mornings by the sea, and a quiet peace in my heart. I don't regret it, because for the first time, I'm not living to please anyone else. I'm living to be myself. What do you think about Christina's journey? Have you ever felt the same way she did? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt, honest stories about family and life. My name is Violet Green, 33 years old, living and working in Tucson, Arizona. I run a small auto repair shop off the highway. Nothing flashy, but I'm independent and know how to stand on my own. I've never been used to family dinners for love, because in my family, love always came with conditions. So when my mother invited me home on a Friday night, saying there was something important to discuss, I already knew it wasn't an invitation. Our house sat on the outskirts of Scottsdale, a gated garden-style villa that looked cozy to outsiders. But inside, it was cold, in every sense of the word. When I arrived, Sabrina, my older sister, was already there, lips painted a loud red, holding a glass of white wine like she was posing for a luxury alcohol ad. She smiled, a kind of smile that makes you want to take 2 steps back. Oh, Violet made it on time? I figured you were busy patching tires on the side of the road somewhere. I didn't respond. I'd heard that kind of comment for over 20 years. My dad folded his newspaper, adjusted his glasses, and said dryly, "We've decided it's time to divide the family assets." I glanced at Mom. She was pretending to fuss over the roast chicken, but her hands were trembling as she turned the tray in the oven. As for Sabrina, she lit up like she'd just won the lottery. "I'm getting the villa in Laguna Beach, right?" Sabrina nearly squealed. "That's right, sweetheart," my mom nodded, voice as sweet as syrup. "Blue ocean, white house, infinity pool. It's all yours." I stared at my glass of water, my fingers tightening around the rim. "And me? What do I get?" Dad turned to me, not making eye contact. "As for you, Violet, we've decided to let you manage the lot on 7th Street. I blinked. "You mean the abandoned parking lot behind the old gas station?" "Yes. Land is still land. You can make something of it. Start small," he said, like he was handing me a precious gift. Sabrina burst out laughing. "Well, hey, at least you'll always have a place to sleep under the stars. Free of charge." Dad nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe you can open a lemonade stand. Or rent it out to someone with a tent. Call it a nature experience." I sat still, my chest as hollow as the cracked lot they just shoved in my hands. In that moment, a memory surfaced. I was 15, coming home from my first day at the garage, hands greasy, beaming with pride. I'd brought home my first paycheck, thinking they'd be proud. Sabrina was on the couch, crying because she didn't get the latest phone, and me? Dad glanced at me and said, "You planning to smell like engine grease for the rest of your life?" Mom muttered. "Well, at least she's doing something with her hands." That week, Sabrina got a brand new iPhone. I got indifference. I stood up, my voice unusually calm. "So she gets the beach and I get cracked concrete and weeds?" But Dad shrugged. "You should be grateful. Some people get nothing." Sabrina lifted her wine glass like a toast. "I'll remember to invite you for summer break, if you can find flip-flops that don't melt on asphalt." I looked her straight in the eye, then turned to my parents. "Thanks for the reminder. I'll turn what you call trash into something worth staring at." I walked away, leaving their laughter behind me. I drove back to my small apartment, still reeling from that night, a white villa in Laguna Beach for my sister and, for me, a weed-covered parking lot. I shouldn't have been surprised. I had never been their priority. Even as a teenager, I knew I wasn't like Sabrina. While she learned to paint nails and watched makeup tutorials dreaming of a reality TV life, I spent my after-school hours crawling under hoods, learning how to change oil, tighten bolts, and read engine diagrams. At 16, I got my first job at a small garage outside town. Those early summer days were brutal. I wore a safety helmet too big for my head, hands always slick with oil, sweat dripping under the scorching 100-degree heat. But I didn't mind. I still remember getting my first paycheck, $240, and bringing it home like it was a trophy. I placed the check on the dinner table, hoping for even a glance of encouragement. Mom was busy picking out bedsheet patterns on her iPad. Dad just flipped to the next page of his newspaper. $200 to breathe in fumes? He muttered. This girl's really planning on living in engine smell forever. Sabrina, sitting across from me, laughed. Better get yourself some expensive perfume. People might think you just crawled out from under a car. I smiled weakly. Not because it was funny, but because it was the only way to keep my heart from cracking. 3 days later, Sabrina showed off a used BMW repainted pastel pink. A reward for embracing her femininity, they said. No one explained further. I didn't ask. It wasn't the last time. At 20, I saved up and enrolled in a night course in electric vehicle technology at the community college. 8 months long. I worked full-time days, studied at night, and took my final exam right after an 11-hour shift. When I graduated, I printed my transcript and taped it to my parents' fridge. The same fridge covered in doctor appointments, water bills, and distant cousin wedding invites. 2 days later, the paper disappeared. No one mentioned it. I asked Mom if she saw it. She didn't look up from her phone. Oh, that thing? It got wet. I tossed it. Was it important? That same week, Sabrina threw a birthday bash for her 25th in Palm Springs. My parents booked her an entire luxury villa with a private chef, DJ, and a full video team to make it look like a wedding. I wasn't invited. I only found out when the family's shared social account posted a photo. Nothing better than time together. I looked at the picture. Dad toasting with Sabrina, Mom hugging her from behind, all smiles. The caption hit harder than anything else. Family is everything. I hit leave group without hesitation. From that point on, I stopped expecting anything. But strangely, a tiny part of me still hoped that maybe, just maybe, one day they'd see my worth. Not through the clothes I wore, my hairstyle, or my perfume, but through the things that truly made me who I am. Today, the parking lot they threw in my face might be the last time I let them trample what I stand for. Because this time, I no longer want their approval. I want them to witness with their own eyes the very thing they once mocked rise up and turn something seemingly worthless into something impossible to ignore. I stood before the city zoning map, staring at a long rectangular patch of land wedged between an old industrial block and 2 service roads. Just cracked concrete, tangled weeds, and a rusted sign barely clinging to its post. Sabrina said I'd end up sleeping under the stars. She was wrong. I returned to the empty lot on 7th Street one Monday morning. The sun was harsh, casting shadows into every crack of the broken pavement. No fence, no sign, nothing but a piece of land forgotten by time. I stood there, arms crossed, took a deep breath and asked myself, if they see this as trash, can I turn it into gold? First came the paperwork. I went to the city planning office, waited 3 hours just to get the official site survey. Then I ran around asking about outdoor dining permits, building a small stage, and setting up lighting systems. They looked at me like I'd just asked how to open a casino in the desert. An abandoned parking lot. What are you planning to do there, miss? The man at the permit desk raised an eyebrow. I smiled faintly. A place people will remember, not a place to park. After 3 days of knocking on every office door, I returned to the garage where I'd worked for the past 9 years. Jeff, my boss, was a silver-bearded man who always spoke softly but saw right through people. I sat down, pulled a rough proposal from my backpack, and spread it across the same table where he usually ate his sandwich at lunch. I'm not asking to quit, I began. I'm asking to invest. Jeff chuckled, folding his arms. Let's hear it. What do you plan to turn that junk lot into? I told him about my idea to create an outdoor food court. A space with food trucks serving Mexican tacos, handmade pizza, locally roasted coffee. A small stage for weekend live music. Wooden pallet benches, string lights hanging above, a chill zone with canvas cushions beneath a salvaged steel art. Not flashy, but solid and different. Jeff stayed quiet for 2 minutes. Then he stood up, walked into his office. When he came back, he placed a thick envelope on the table. No contract needed, just make it count. I took it, throat tight. $30,000 from a man who wasn't family, never said he loved me, but always noticed what I ate for lunch. The next 3 weeks were a race. I hired a backhoe, cleared the land, repaired the electrical system, bought secondhand equipment from liquidation markets to build an outdoor kitchen for the food trucks, laid recycled bricks for the main path, hand-painted a wooden sign for the entrance. The greasy garden. Half joke, half real. Easy to remember. I called Becca, an old friend from art class, to redecorate the space with hand-drawn details. She looked around and said, "You're nuts." But nuts with a blueprint. We built a small stage from reclaimed wood, installed speakers, hung lights, spread picnic blankets, and secured a permit to sell craft beer for events. Opening day came in the sweltering heat of July. I didn't know if anyone would show up, but they did. A group of college kids came to hear live music. An elderly couple stopped by for afternoon coffee. A dad brought his daughter for pizza. Then more and more. I sold out of 400 sandwiches in one night. 3 days later, a post went viral online. From parking lot to culinary haven, Violet Green is making Tucson pay attention. In just 3 weeks, the Greasy Garden became the city's newest hotspot. Every weekend night, the stage had live bands. The benches were full, the lights always on. On Instagram, our tag kept popping up, each post a new affirmation. I wasn't just good at fixing cars, I knew how to build something out of what others threw away. I stood behind the coffee bar, watching the long line of people, the scent of grilled meat in the air, the strum of guitar, the smiles of strangers, filling the void I had carried for years. And I knew this was just the beginning. I was wiping down tables one quiet Sunday afternoon when I heard the click-clack of high heels on concrete. I looked up and saw Sabrina. Tight white dress, Chanel purse on her arm, makeup so polished it looked like she was headed to a gala, standing at the entrance of my food court. And right behind her, like a shadow, was my mother. My heart didn't skip, my breath didn't catch. Just one single feeling. A calm, forged from years of distance. Sabrina glanced around, lips pressed tight as she took in every corner of the Greasy Garden, now featured on maps, blogs, and foodie sites. "Violet," she called, her voice stretched like she was greeting an old maid. "I didn't think you'd actually turn that parking lot into, this." I didn't answer, just tilted my head. What word would you prefer? Night market, charity zone with string lights, or that place you'll never be able to build yourself? She froze, but Mom stepped forward, dressed in a beige suit, hair perfectly combed, pearl bracelet gleaming, the kind of jewelry I'd never been allowed to touch. "We need to talk," she said, trying to sound composed. I pointed toward the taco stand. "Monday to Thursday, 3 to 5 p.m. I have 5 minutes between rushes." Sabrina scoffed. "Oh, come on. This is family business." I crossed my arms. "Family? That word sounds strange coming from either of you." They were quiet for a beat. Then Mom softened her voice. "We all know this land originally belonged to the family. We gave it to you. But now that it's doing so well, maybe it's time to discuss a partnership?" I almost laughed. "Partnership?" I repeated, fighting the urge to burst out. Sabrina jumped in, her voice sharper. "I want you to sell. This is family property. Mom and Dad always meant to keep it for both of us. No one thought you'd commercialize it on your own." I looked her straight in the eye. "When you all tossed that land at me like a joke, I didn't hear anyone say family property. I just think you should consider it. For the family," Sabrina insisted, her face reddening as she held back. "You already got your share. Laguna Beach, remember? The villa with the pool, the ocean view balcony, and the white sofa you flaunted all over Instagram." Sabrina frowned. "Things aren't the same anymore. The real estate market's a mess." "You're doing well. I just thought maybe we could both benefit." I looked at Mom, then back at Sabrina, my gaze steady. "Now, Violet," my mom said, suppressing her frustration. "I know I've been harsh, but this is a chance for the family to reconnect." I nodded slowly. "Reconnect after you let me grow up feeling like I was always second choice? After she laughed in my face and told me to sleep under the stars? After this whole family turned silence into a weapon to crush every effort I made?" "That was a long time ago," Mom whispered. I took one step forward, my voice low but clear. "No. It never passed. It was just buried under weeds in that lot, and now that I've made it bloom, you show up with shovels, ready to dig it up and take the fruit." Sabrina's face went pale. Mom still tried to hold on. "So you're turning your back on family?" I let out a soft laugh. No, I'm just choosing to move forward without dragging along the people who once pushed me down. Without another word, I left them frozen in place amidst the acoustic music from the small stage and the sound of people laughing around them. They once thought this place would be my final failure. What they didn't realize was that their contempt had become my fuel. And now, they'd come knocking. But no one opens the door for those who only show up when the table's already set. One early fall afternoon, while I was reviewing our weekly produce order, my phone buzzed non-stop. 3 missed calls from a familiar number. Sabrina. I set the phone down and didn't answer. 10 minutes later, a message came in. Please, I need to see you. Urgent, just 10 minutes. I didn't respond, but I knew she'd come. And right on cue, an hour later, the silver sports car she used to flaunt on every platform rolled into the lot, now looking like it had just come out of a financial war zone. Sabrina stepped out. No silk dress, no heels, just a wrinkled tee, faded jeans, dark circles under her eyes, and a messy bun. For the first time in years, she wasn't wearing makeup. You've got 5 minutes, I said without looking up from my iPad. Sabrina swallowed hard. You know the real estate market's crashing, right? I didn't respond. I have to sell the villa, but I can't. Bad credit. The bank wants $200,000 just to let me list it again. I looked at my sister, the same sister who once laughed in my face because I wasn't the one living in Laguna Beach, now standing in front of me on the concrete I once cleared with my bare hands, asking for help. So, I asked, voice calm, you can help. A loan, in advance. Call it whatever you want. I know you can. I nodded. Yeah, I can, but I won't. Her eyes widened. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Just like you could have supported me back then, but you didn't, remember? When you were sipping champagne in your villa and telling me I'd never do anything with a cracked slab of concrete? Sabrina was speechless. She opened her mouth to respond, but I raised a hand. You made your choices. And so did I. She turned and walked away from the lot in silence. I thought that was the end of it. But not even 3 days later, my parents showed up. I was mid-conversation with an event planner when I spotted them at the entrance. Not stepping inside, not calling my name, just standing there like relics of a world that no longer fit. I made them wait another 10 minutes before I approached. Looks like you all just remembered I'm part of the family, I said, unable to hide the sarcasm. My father looked noticeably older. His hair had gone white, his shoulders hunched, and the edge in his eyes had long faded. My mother still carried herself with some elegance, but her eyes darted around, and her voice was no longer steady. We need to talk, seriously, Mom began. I nodded. Go ahead. I've got 10 minutes. Dad sighed. My business? It's collapsing. Partners pulled out. Operational costs are out of control. Your mom lost a big investment in real estate, too. I stayed quiet, waiting for the part I knew was coming. We need a loan, around $500,000. I chuckled. Not loudly, but just enough to make a few nearby customers glance over. Then I stepped closer, voice low and even. I once needed a hug, a simple congratulations, a look of acknowledgement. I got none of that. And now you need $500,000? Mom reached for my hand. Violet, we're family. I pulled my hand away. Family doesn't abandon each other, doesn't mock the ones they claim to love, and they don't come crawling back only when they need money. My dad furrowed his brow. You've made it. Can't you be a little more generous? I looked him straight in the eye. It's not that I'm stingy. It's that you both taught me the most expensive lesson of all. Everyone lives with the choices they make. My mom's voice trembled. We'll pay it back. We'll sign a contract, with interest, whatever it takes. I took a step back and nodded lightly. Fine. A contract's possible. But the price won't be cheap. Because aside from the money, what you both lost was my trust. I stepped back into my world, leaving them standing in the middle of the buzzing food court, the place they once called a joke. I didn't argue, didn't make promises, didn't even say no. I simply let them see that the Violet they once treated like nothing was now the one they had to beg. That night, I sat in my tiny office, just a converted shipping container, staring at my computer screen, feeling strangely calm. I hadn't shouted, blamed, or pleaded. I just said no. And for people like them, that hurt worse than a slap. But I knew one thing for sure. They wouldn't stop there. 3 days later, it came true. While checking the review section on the Greasy Garden's official page, I saw the first post. Overcrowded, cold food, rude staff, avoid, -1 star. Then the second. Dirty space, music too loud, owner doesn't know how to run a business, 1 star. Then a third. Way overpriced for what it is, owner's ungrateful to her own family, 1 star. I chuckled. Not out of sadness, but because it was just too predictable. The last line gave them away. That wasn't a real review, that was personal. They didn't need weapons, just Wi-Fi and a few clicks to spread poison. I didn't respond. I didn't retaliate. I stayed silent and called Madeline, my lawyer. I think it's time we review every permit and license, I said. You, looking to defend or attack? Madeline asked, voice sharp as ever. Both, I replied. The next day, a city inspector showed up, clipboard in hand, voice polite but eyes apologetic. We received an anonymous complaint, he said. Someone reported that this location may not meet outdoor food service regulations. I nodded. I figured who sent it. We're required to inspect, he added, clearly uncomfortable. Go right ahead, I smiled. I've got everything in order. My lawyer will have a copy in your inbox within 10 minutes. Over the course of 1 week, I got hit with 3 more surprise inspections: food safety, lighting compliance, and noise control. Every time, I stayed calm, courteous, and had every single permit ready to present. Madeline helped lock down every corner of the business, from public liability insurance to sublease agreements. We even filed supplemental registrations just to make sure no one could exploit any legal loophole. I also hired a professional cleaning crew twice a day, replaced all old trash bins with eco-friendly ones, and added QR-coded feedback signs throughout the venue, making fake reviews easy to detect and easy to dismiss. But I didn't just offend. I struck back with calculated kindness. I launched a $5 student meal program every Tuesday. I hosted nonprofit music nights for local bands. And I partnered with food bloggers to feature the Greasy Garden as a leading eco-conscious dining destination. I stood in the middle of that old lot, once the place where people dumped disappointment, now a gathering space for those seeking something real. Every fake review made me work harder. Every bitter word made me calmer and sharper. And then, 1 week later, the official review site posted a public statement. The Greasy Garden has passed all inspections and is now recognized as a benchmark model for outdoor dining venues in the city. We commend their professionalism and transparency. I didn't have to say a word. I just reposted the link with 3 simple words. Thanks for the concern. My family once tried to bury me into the ground. I simply rose up from it. That Saturday night, the Greasy Garden was packed, just like every weekend. An indie band was playing upbeat melodies beneath golden string lights, the air filled with the scent of food, laughter, and the energy of a street festival right in the heart of the city. I was standing at the central booth checking the VIP guest list when a strange noise came from the entrance. A white SUV screeched to a stop, the door flew open, and then I saw Sabrina. My sister stepped out in a wrinkled red satin dress, one heel crooked, her hair a mess and mascara streaked like she'd either cried or thrown up. A half-finished wine glass in hand, she stumbled toward the stage area. I immediately signaled my security team. Sabrina spun around unsteadily, then shouted into the crowd, "Oh, look, everyone! Violet Green, the parking lot queen. I came to celebrate." The music stopped. People paused their meals, their conversations, their laughter. Dozens of eyes turned on her, and then on me. I walked toward her, keeping my composure. Sabrina, I think you should leave. I'll call a car for you. She sneered, stepping in closer. Oh, no, you don't get to kick me out. You owe me your whole life. Who would you be without the green name? This family property isn't yours alone. I took a step forward, voice calm. You're drunk. People are watching. You need to go. Now. Sabrina laughed loudly, then suddenly snatched a cocktail from a guest's hand and threw it straight at my chest. A collective gasp echoed from the crowd. The cold drink soaked my shirt, the scent of citrus and vodka hitting my nose. But I didn't flinch. I stared her dead in the eye. Escort her out, I said to security. But Sabrina thrashed and shouted, You think you're so noble. You're just a grease monkey who got lucky. You're no better than the rest of us. Two guards grabbed her arms, trying to be gentle, but she twisted and screamed like someone possessed. I'll sue you. I'll take everything back. This belongs to my family. I turned to Aiden, head of security. Call the police. She just assaulted someone and caused a public disturbance. Some guests had already started recording on their phones. Sabrina kept screaming and cursing as she was restrained. 10 minutes later, red and blue lights flashed across the glow of the greasy garden. Officers arrived, listened to my statement, and proceeded to arrest her for disturbing the peace and assault with liquid. Sabrina was handcuffed. Her face was pale, mascara running in 2 dark trails down her cheeks. She screamed as they led her to the patrol car. Violet, you're a monster. You're destroying this family. I said nothing. My mother arrived 10 minutes later, still in her nightgown, with a fur coat thrown over it, slippers on her feet, panic written all over her face. She rushed to me, grabbing my arm. Violet, you can't let your sister be arrested like this. She's blood, she's family. I pulled my arm away, voice cold. When I was 17, standing in the yard holding my straight-A report card with hands stained in engine oil. What did you do for your blood then? Maybe that was a long time ago. No, I cut her off. You taught me this lesson. You live the life you earn. Her eyes welled up. Please, can't you just let this one go? I looked at the police car fading into the distance. I've let a lot of things go in my life, but not this time. I turned and walked away, leaving her in the glow of the fairy lights, soft music playing again, and hundreds of strangers watching from their tables. I never thought I'd return to the house on Belmont Drive, the place I grew up in silence, surrounded by laughter that never included me. But then, an email from Western Mesa Bank popped up in my inbox, with a subject line that made my hand pause mid-keystroke as I was submitting a new inventory order. Property in foreclosure. Belmont Drive, Tucson. I froze for a few seconds, fingers still on the keyboard. No surprise. After Dad's business collapsed, and after Sabrina's scandal at the Greasy Garden went viral, they didn't have many options left. The bank would seize the house. The so-called perfect family home, with white stone steps, green painted fences, and mahogany windows, was about to slip through their fingers. But it wouldn't go to strangers. I quietly placed a bid through a small legal firm under a representative's name. I didn't need them to know. I just needed everything done by the book, no exceptions. A month later, on a dry morning while I was planning to expand our food space to the adjacent lot, Ava, my assistant, said someone was waiting in my office. Who is it? I asked, eyes still on the layout. Your parents? I looked up, not surprised, just earlier than I expected. They sat silently, their eyes heavy. No designer clothes, no polished looks. Mom wore an old sweater and clutched a paper bag. Dad looked like a piece of him had faded away. I sat down across from them, said nothing. Let them speak first. Violet, Mom began, voice hoarse. The bank took the house. We have nowhere to go. Dad stared at the floor, silent. Your sister's still under supervision, not home yet. We don't want to sleep in the car. I nodded slightly. And now I'm family again. Mom didn't argue. She simply pulled out a crumpled stack of papers. We can pay monthly, just need somewhere to stay. Until I cut in. No need to negotiate, I already have a solution. I opened a drawer and placed a file on the table. Slada grabbed Mom, took it, flipped to the first page. Her eyebrows tightened. A lease agreement? I sat up straighter, voice firm, emotionless. I bought the house on Belmont Drive. Legally. In my name. And I'm offering to rent it back to you. At market rate. All terms are outlined. Dad gripped the papers, hands trembling slightly. You really want to do this to your own parents? I looked him in the eye. Do you remember what you said when you gave Sabrina the beach house and handed me a cracked parking lot? You told me to be grateful I got something. Well, today, I'm giving you something too. With conditions. Just like you taught me. I'm choked up. The rent is high. Too high. How are we supposed to manage? I smiled faintly. Still cheaper than what I paid growing up in that house. Feeling like I never belonged. Dad leaned in, holding back frustration. You're getting revenge. I shook my head. No, revenge is tearing down the house, kicking you out. This is a chance to live decently, in a home you once said wasn't mine. Silence. Thick air between us. Eventually, Dad picked up the pen and signed. His hand shook so badly he touched the edge of the paper twice. Mom didn't look at me, just bowed her head and scribbled her name. I slid the contract into my leather folder. Stood up. See you at the start of the month. If the rent's on time, all goes smoothly. If not, I'll enforce the contract. I turned and walked out. Outside, sunlight streamed through planters along the path, lighting the once cracked pavement where weeds used to grow. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt justified. They once taught me that value must be earned through effort. Now they had to pay for what they once thought came free. 3 months later, I got an automated email from the law firm. Lease payment received from Mr. and Mrs. Green. On time, no remarks. I clicked and closed the tab. No smile, no sarcasm. Just a quiet acknowledgement of reality. I was the landlord now, and they were tenants. The house I once grew up in, once ignored and at dinner tables and crushed beneath their comparisons, now bore my name. They walked its hardwood floors I repaired, used the fireplace I maintained, looked out on a garden I wasn't allowed to enter because my clothes were dirty. They could enjoy the view now, under one condition: rent due on the 1st of every month. I didn't need their calls, didn't need their thanks, didn't need their apologies. Their silence once broke me. Now that same silence tightens around their pride every single day. Every Sunday morning, I still drive past that neighborhood, not to rub it in, but because it's on the way to my organic produce supplier in North Tucson. I glance at the old house, curtains always closed. Old car parked by the curb, no party lights, no music from the backyard. They live quietly now, just like I used to. One late afternoon, I was sitting on the rooftop of the greasy garden, now expanded into a full culinary complex with a book cafe and poetry stage, when a group of college students came to meet me. A girl named Lena, a senior in food business, shyly handed me a proposal for a plant-based food truck concept. "You're the reason I believed I could build something from nothing," she said, eyes glowing. "From a piece of land nobody wanted." I looked at the packet, nodded. "You don't have to start in the right place. You just need to be angry enough, tough enough, and never forget why you began." I signed a small partnership contract, giving the students a section of the east lot to launch their pilot. They squealed and hugged. I stayed back, sipping mint tea quietly. Sabrina was released on probation after 2 months. She didn't contact me, didn't apologize. I didn't expect her to. I heard she's now working part-time as a spa assistant in Flagstaff. her first steady job after more than a decade of floating. I didn't feel joy, but I felt peace. Because I knew life had finally taught her what I learned at 16. No one owes you anything. And no one gets to live off someone else's work forever. I still keep my old grease-stained coverall hanging in the office, the one I wore on my first day at the garage. I don't need it anymore, but I keep it as a reminder. I didn't start at the top. I started with oil on my wrists and a parking lot people laughed at. Now, I don't need their validation. I don't need belated affection. Don't need awkward apologies. I just need one truth. I'm the only one in this family who stood up, not for revenge, but for dignity. And the irony? They live in a house I own, pass by my face on magazine covers, hear my name at startup events. And each month, they have to remind themselves. Each month, they fund the life of the person they once mocked. I didn't take revenge. I just stopped bowing. Violet's story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the people closest to us force us to rise alone. But with enough grit, you don't just survive, you turn pain into power. In real life, there will be moments when you're overlooked or left behind. What matters isn't what they think, it's how you respond. Just like Violet, you can rewrite your place with the very hands they once dismissed. What do you think about Violet's journey and how she turned the tables? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more real-life stories full of emotion and family lessons.